Well, I am so excited to be kicking off a brand new message series today that I'm calling Dialed In. And I want to explain why we're calling it that. Now, some of you know, my childhood was a little interesting in that I grew up flying on airplanes all over the place. My father was a pilot with Air Canada. And specifically in my teenage years, I got to fly a lot with my dad. And most of those flights, I got to sit in the jump seat in the cockpit for takeoffs and landings. And it is such an amazing view to get to sit in the cockpit for those takeoffs and landings. I remember sometimes my dad would open up the cockpit to nervous flyers. And this is before 9/11, of course, when that could happen. And so, people would come up all wide-eyed, kind of like nervous about what's going on. And they'd see me like a 13-year-old kid sitting in the seat. And my dad had given me headphones that I could listen to air traffic control. And there was like 6 different frequencies I could dial in and turn knobs and stuff. But these buttons, they're kind of next to all the engine buttons and everything. And so me being the brat that I was, like I'd see people that were pretty nervous and I'd intentionally like start pressing the buttons and turning them and stuff. And people would always be looking like, "What are you doing, kid?" And I was like, "Oh, nothing." But one story specifically I want to share with you is on my way back from Osaka, Japan, we're coming into land at Toronto Pearson Airport. And it was an extremely foggy day. And I don't think I was fully aware of how foggy this was. And I experienced my very first ILS Category 3 landing, to which you're like, blah, 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 blah. What is that? What's an ILS Category 3 landing? Well, ILS stands for Instrument Landing System. And Category 3 means the weather is so poor, the visibility is so poor that the airplane, it has to auto land without the pilots controlling anything. The computers land the plane because there's no other safe way to do it. And so the way this works, there's a radio signal that the pilots tune into. They dial into this very specific radio frequency that is projecting the glide slope, the angle, so to speak, from the side that the plane is going to come down on to make sure they're coming in at the right altitude. And then there's also another beam that shows whether the plane is left or right. And so the pilots, what they see on their monitor are these 2 kind of pink lines that match up right in the middle of the square that indicate the computer, it's flying this thing perfectly down beam and lined up with the runway. Now, usually, I'd been in the cockpit enough to know that when you're about 300 feet above the ground, the runway looks huge right in front of you. Like this photo you're seeing here, you can't miss it. There's all the runway lights and things are just, it's just massive right in front of you there. And as we're coming into this particular landing in Toronto, I hear the call out from the computer system that it's called the Aircraft Altitude Annunciator. It calls out how high above the ground that the plane is. So I heard the number 300 called out, which usually by then the runway's right in front of you. I see nothing. And this, I found a video online that kind of shows you what I was seeing for the last few seconds of the landing. Check this out.
200. 100. Minimum. 30. 20. 10.
It's startling how fast, out of nothing, these lights start whipping by and you realize you're traveling at like 150 miles an hour. And you think to yourself in that moment, you think, what would have happened if we didn't have that radio frequency? What if there wasn't such a thing as an ILS? How would any human being know that that's where the runway was and how to land at just like the right angle and all that stuff? It was kind of like startling in that moment. But it's important to note that there are many different radio frequencies that are important for planes to operate safely. There's of course the air traffic control radio where they're clearing the pilots to approach and to land. Then when they get on the ground, they need to switch frequencies to a ground radio frequency that tells them what taxiways to taxi on to get to the gate. When they get to the gate, they change radio frequencies to the ramp, and they can communicate with the people underneath the airplane, and they can make sure the chocks have been put in, and they can turn off the engines and all that stuff. And of course, then there's like the Air Canada exclusive radio for company talk and all that. Now, here's why I'm telling you all this nerdy stuff, because you're like, I don't really care about any of this, Mike. Here's why I'm talking about this. You can have all of those other radio frequencies, the tower, ground, ramp, the Air Canada radio frequencies, all of those are good and helpful. But if you didn't have the radio frequency for that ILS approach, none of those other radio things matter. I mean, you can be cleared to land, but if you don't know where the runway is, that's not going to be all that helpful, is it? It's absolutely imperative for the safety of everyone that that plane be dialed into the correct frequency. So I kind of geeked out there for a second with all like the nerdy airplane details, but I want to tell you how this applies to what we're going to be talking about in the weeks ahead. The same way there are so many different radio frequencies for that airplane. You and I, we live in a world where there are a lot of different beliefs that Christians have about all sorts of things. As you know, there are many different versions of Christianity that we see around us. Each denomination with their own terms and conditions, each group of Christians with their own traditions and their own style of worship and how they see things. As you know, there's Baptist and there's Presbyterian, Anglican, Lutheran, the United Church, the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, Alliance, AGC, MB, PAOC, ABCD, EFG. Like, there's like all these different versions of Christianity. And the main thing that they all have in common is that each one is confident that their version is the right version. And all these denominations, if we're honest, all of them are probably wrong about some things, but hopefully they're not wrong on the essential things. The main question that we want to ask and answer during this series called Dialed In is this question right here. What must one believe to be a faithful follower of Jesus? What beliefs are actually essential? What beliefs are actually indispensable and necessary? What beliefs are crucial and central and required? And on the other side of that coin, what beliefs are peripheral? What beliefs are just cultural? What beliefs are just comfortable because that's how I've always done it. That's how I've always believed about it. Which of these beliefs are just fashionable? Whatever the latest cool belief is in church, the latest talking point. Now, as we like to do here at Catalyst, we're going to take a few minutes to discuss a few questions back to back. And here's the first one, and after you've discussed this, we'll go right into the second one. Here's question number one. Can you think of any church traditions or rules that never made any sense to you at all? Things that, if not practiced, or things that if a church member participated in, would mean that they were falling away from the Christian faith itself to the people in that denomination? Go ahead and discuss, and we'll continue in a moment. Here's the second question that we're going to ask now, and that is, have you ever been around a Christian who thought that their version of faith was superior to yours? And or have you ever been that Christian? A Christian who thought your version was superior to others? What were the hot topic issues, morals, or way of life that led to this superiority complex? Go ahead and discuss. We'll continue in a moment. I don't need to tell you that we live in a culture here in North America where so many people have stopped going to church and given up on Christianity, and they've walked away. And there's a number of reasons for this, I believe, but one of the reasons is because Christians and churches have confused what is essential to the message of Jesus and what is peripheral. You may or may not remember what Jesus said in John 13, verses 34 and 35. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, and reminder, Jesus had just washed the disciples' feet in humility. So he says, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. You may recall in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus, he told us what to do with our enemies. He said, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. And yet, for some reason, so many Christians and so many churches today, they have decided that the most important thing, the most essential thing, is to get on a soapbox and point our fingers and to tell everybody what the truth is and to say it loud and proud and let the chips fall where they may. And their tone and their posture is anything but Christ-like. Now, that's not the only reason that I think people have walked away from the church and walked away from Christianity. I think many have also walked away because the version of Christianity that they were taught, it simply didn't work in their daily lives. They were taught a version of faith that said, if you believe the right things, and if you go to church, and if you love God, then you'll be a giant killer like David was. And David slew Goliath. And you're going to have victory in your life over your marriage and your finances and your health. Everything's going to be great. And people will look at your life and say, wow, I want to have your life. And for a lot of people, they looked at their life circumstances and they said, that's not working. That's not true. What's this about? The Goliath is beating me up in every area of my life. What do you mean God loves me? I don't even know if God exists. You know, believers have been taught, if you love God and do it God's way, you're going to walk through the Red Sea on dry ground, and your enemies, they're just going to be drowned around you. And yet, as so many people look around, they're like, that's not true at all in my life. And so many people just said, sorry, I'm out. I don't believe in this anymore. And so possibly because of the hypocrisy of Christians who were very un-Christ-like, or because of a version of Christianity that was taught to them just not working in their life anymore, it just wasn't working in the real world, they left. They left church and they left their faith. The question we are asking in this series, once again, is what must one believe to be a faithful follower of Jesus? Is it possible that some have left the faith unnecessarily because of churches and Christians who they tacked on all kinds of other stuff that wasn't central in the first place? Many of you have heard the term before. You've heard the term, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, most of us probably aren't familiar with where that phrase originated. Turns out it was a 16th century German idiom that serves as a warning to us as humans. And this is the best definition I could find. The warning is this: in your zeal to rid yourself of something unwanted or harmful, don't inadvertently rid yourself of something valuable and important. I want us to take a moment and discuss this question. Can you think of any examples from your own life where you threw the baby out with the bathwater? What was the unwanted or harmful thing your decision tried to fix? And what valuable and important thing did you also lose in the process? Examples may include things, beliefs about your parents, beliefs about your boss, beliefs about health, the opposite sex, other cultures, education, relationships, etc. Go ahead and discuss, and we'll continue in a moment. You see, the danger in not knowing what are the core beliefs of a faithful Jesus follower, the danger of not knowing what those core beliefs are and why they matter, it makes it so easy for us to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Here's a few examples. Some people, they've said, Mike, I don't understand. My dad, he is so angry against Christianity and church. I've invited him and I've said, Dad, no, it's not like that. You got to come and give it a try. But there's this like crazy wall that I run into, and something must have happened to him earlier in his life, some bad church experience. And perhaps it led your dad to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm done with this. This is what Christianity's about. That's what the pastor's about. See you later. For others, it was men abusing their wives by telling them to submit. You're to submit to me as a man. God has made me the head of this household. And yet the men who were quoting this passage failed to appreciate that that very passage was speaking of mutual submission to one another in love, where the husband was to lay down his life for his wife and to put her needs ahead of his own needs. And people said, if that's how it is, I'm out. I'm not a Christian. I can't believe in that anymore. For someone else, it could be this idea that I don't think God is going to send my brother to hell. My brother, he doesn't believe, but he is a fine and outstanding human being. You're telling me he's going to hell because he doesn't believe what the church believes? I'm sorry. I'm out. I gotta think about this. You see, a faith that can't be questioned can't be trusted. A faith that can't be questioned can't be trusted. And the reason is because all of us, pastors included, are going to have moments or seasons of our life where we have some questions, where we have some doubts. And our faith needs to be able to hold up to the rigor of the questions and doubts that we are going to have. And so the question is, are there answers to the questions that can anchor us through our doubts and give us confidence and peace in the middle of life's storms? Are there adequate answers? And that's what we're going to hopefully explore in the weeks ahead. What are the core beliefs of a Jesus follower, and why is it important? What is the rationale for those beliefs? And so we're going to take a look at topics in the next 10 weeks. We're going to be looking at the event that launched Christianity in the first place. We're going to look at the resurrection of Jesus. We're going to spend a couple weeks looking at the Bible. What is it? Where did it come from? Why do we believe it's a book from God to us and not a book from human beings about God? We're going to look at that. We're going to take 3 weeks to look at the nature of God himself, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. We're going to look at what Jesus teaches about the human condition and our sin nature and how that separates us from our Creator. We're going to look at salvation. We're going to look at the church. We're going to look at eternity, and we're going to look at the end times. And so not only do we want to get dialed in to the bare essentials here of what a faithful follower of Jesus should believe, but we also want to get dialed into how these beliefs, these core beliefs that Jesus taught us to have, how it can give us life to the full, and how it makes sense in the world that we live in today. So we want this series over the coming weeks, we want this to be a safe place to ask questions and to think together. Not to just listen to what I say or someone else says, but for us to ratchet up our brain muscles and to think critically and to ask questions and to seek answers. And this sets us up for the last question of today, which is just meant to be an introduction to this series. You're going to discuss this question, and after this, you're going to pray and enjoy lunch together. Here's the last question of today. Have you ever had questions about the Christian faith that you were afraid to ask for fear of being judged? Did you eventually get a chance to ask and search for answers to your questions? If not, do you have any questions about what Christians believe that you hope to have answered during this message series? Go ahead and discuss for the time that you have remaining, and then someone's going to pray, give thanks for lunch, and I look forward to seeing you in person next week at Loyola Secondary School. But even before that, I'll be seeing you this Thursday night at the Coulters for those of you who can make it. So I'm going to put the question back on screen, discuss, and we'll see you soon.